Hey guys, how is everyone doing today? I am here with Cecilia Hassan, who is, this interview was interesting because I had a lot of ways that I want to introduce you. So I will start with an amazing person, who's been able to do a lot for me in my life, those that I serve, and I think everyone connected to her, whether it's on her immigration Facebook group, just someone really amazing, and I'm very thankful to have you here, Cecilia.
Thank you so much. Those are really kind words. Thank you. So it's a pleasure to be here. I was really excited when you reached out. So I'm happy to chat with you always.
Well, thank you. Doing these interviews, sometimes I like to start with like titles and those kind of professional clinical notions, if you will.
Mhm.
But I guess virtually knowing you, being in the Facebook group, it feels like it went a little bit beyond that, and it gave me this feeling of this is someone I can trust, someone I can go to, or a place that she built where individuals have that same system
Mhm.
or systematic understanding. So Cecilia, as far as your background, tell us a little bit about that clinical background, and then what got you into private practice.
Sure. So by training, I'm a clinical social worker. This month marked 20 years that I've been doing this, which makes me feel really old.
Wow.
And I've worked in a variety of settings. Some jobs you actively look for, some kind of fall into your lap, and different paths. Working in school systems, adoption agencies. I did a lot of medical social worker, inpatient and outpatient, a lot of maternity social work. But the one constant, despite all those different fields, was always working with immigrants. And because I speak Spanish, a lot of my clients were Spanish speaking, but a lot of them weren't, depending where I was living at the time in the DC area and beyond. There were different immigrant groups that I worked with. So I would say that was one of my constants, regardless of the agency or the field I was in. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I was working at an agency in a management position, and I sort of had this moment when I realized I didn't get into this for management. It was sort of the next progression in my career, but it wasn't necessarily something I wanted to be doing. I reflected on it, and I really missed that direct client contact. And so I started a private practice. I opened a private practice. It was very part-time. And I was still doing some contract work with some agencies and doing part-time private practice. And at the beginning, I read everything, all the blogs, all the podcasts, all the wisdom, and then, that said, pick a specialty, niche down. And of course, I did the opposite because I know better, right? And because I'm like, yeah, but I'm the exception.
There we go.
And, when you fill out your profile, like your Psychology Today directory or whatever, I'm like clicking all of them. Like, yeah, I know how to do that. I know,
Everyone.
I can do anything. There was definitely things I shied away from, but there was a lot that I clicked on. And predictably, things were slow. I did have good referral sources. I built good relationships with doctors in the area, and they would send me clients, but it was slow, and it was very unsteady. And it was, for me, very anxiety provoking. Instead of focusing on the client as they were going through their journey, as I saw us progressing towards termination, I start immediately thinking like, oh, I got to fill the spot,
Yeah.
Or alternatively, when I would get a lot of calls and I didn't have spots, I'd be like, oh, I
Yeah.
need those people in 3 weeks, so that flow didn't really work for me well. It was, I felt like I was spending too much time getting referral sources and that flow of clients. I never got that down with private practice. So that wasn't working really well for me in the traditional private practice sense.
Okay. That statement that you mentioned, such a strong level of vulnerability where I have a patient coming in and towards those last sessions, part of that brain goes, knock, knock. They're not going to be here too much longer. So how are you going to, pay X amount of bills?
Right.
And it's
Yeah.
often not something that's spoken about. I think especially for us as clinicians, because we tend to, gravitate a little more towards everything nice, right? Sprinkles and everything nice.
Yeah.
But I love that you mentioned that, because it shows how in private practice, if we have that worry or that anxiety, it can impede in our clinical practice. It could hurt, our business development.
I,
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I definitely think you don't have as much confidence going out or just working on your practice when you're worrying about, bills and how are you going to keep this practice afloat and running a business with no training. Like I don't have an MBA. I just went to grad school for, my MSW and we had not one class on that. So.
Correct. I had an interview with Michelle Hardman. She's here in my area, North Carolina, and she has prime practice, but she does a lot of work with Brene Brown and being brave and being confident in building a private practice. And just like you said, I went to grad school, not one class that I have that was business related. So it's like get out there and somehow make it work.
Yeah. I remember we had this one class. I don't even know what the class was about, right? But the professor had a private practice, and she would every now and then mention something about it, and we would hang on to her every word. It's so funny. I don't even remember what she taught me, but I remember her little from private practice, because we were all hanging on her every word because none of us knew how to do it otherwise.
Yeah, it was so scary then.
Yeah.
So you got to this point where that was happening. What did you do to transition your practice, I guess that entrepreneur side of the brain, into stability?
Right. So I wish I could say it was a really well thought out plan. But, I have to acknowledge there's a good amount of serendipity into it. My husband happened, I looked at offices everywhere. His office happened to be down the street. And he's an attorney. And he would ask me from time to time, he would have lots of different clients, and he'd say, I saw someone today that looks like they really need couples counseling. Do you know someone who would be good for that? Or, I met this kid and whatever issue, they really could use some family therapy. And obviously I wouldn't take his clients, but I knew a lot of therapists in the area, so I would refer. And then one day he said, do you know anyone who does immigration evaluations? And I was like, what the heck is that? And I learned a little bit about it. And I thought to myself, I know a lot about immigrant mental health, and I know a lot about evaluations because a lot of the work I had always done is assessment. The job I had before private practice was at an adoption agency, so I knew a lot about home studies. So at the start, I reached out to a handful, maybe 4 attorneys in the area. And I said, listen, I wrote to them and I had conversations with them, and I said, this is my experience. This is my clinical experience. I sent them a copy of a redacted report I had done for a family case, not at all related to immigration. I said, this is how I write. This is what I write. And could we collaborate? Could I be of any help to you? And they called me back, and I'm really grateful for those first 4 attorneys. And that group grew from 4 to maybe 6 or 7 over the next course of the year. But they were my first editors, and they were really great about it. Because attorneys can really be direct. There's no oh, well, I think this was beautifully written, but they're take this out. This is useless. Add more of this. I need more of this. This is good, and it was very clear cut. So working through that, I always say it's kind of a Frankenstein, eval at the beginning. You had one part here and one part there, but over time it was really refined with their input. And that became my first template, which has, since been refined and refined over and over again. So word got out, one attorney referred me to another colleague, and sort of that's how word spread. And it was a completely different referral process, which made things easier on that end for me. And then I was able to focus more on the clinical part and then also growing my practice. As that work picked up, as clients terminated, I didn't refill their spots. I just left those spots open for immigration evaluations. And then over time, just a natural transition, probably over 6 months, they were only immigration evaluations, and it's been that way for about 4 years.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. And, again, vulnerability and bravery. And you're right with the attorneys. I'll send my evaluations over in the beginning. I was like, cry.
Yeah, they
What
don't
do
pull
you,
punches.
what do you mean it's not good? Do you want to look at it again?
Yeah.
That hurt my feelings.
Yeah.
Those would be some of the internal dialogue that was taking place.
Yeah.
So you niched your practice, right? You honed in,
Yeah.
and what number did you come to as far as this is how many referrals I need to keep my practice where I want it to be at?
Well, it was limping along, so anything was better than it was before. I don't know that I had. Again, it was a lot of experimentation. I was subleasing an office, and my landlord, bless her, it seemed like every few months I was like, well, can I try evenings? Can I try this? Can I try that? She's super flexible. So there's a lot of experimentation. And I think it wasn't like I sat down and made a business plan, honestly. It was a lot of trial and error. And then what I have decided upon, or sort of what's been working most recently, is I see about, it averages out to somewhere between, I would say, 8 to 10 clients a month.
Okay.
I do take, I'm very fortunate that I am able to I probably take approximately 6 weeks off per year, not altogether. So that's, it comes out to an average of 10 clients a month.
Okay. That's beautiful. It's nice to hear a little bit of the beginning of your story. And now you're able to create a lifestyle where you can take those 6 weeks off. I always try to come, at that with a mentality of, if you're my clinician and you're able to take that much time off, then I know that your checkbox for self-care is checked over and over and over, so that whenever you're serving me, you are focused, you are present, versus being tired and overwhelmed and worried where the money's coming in, and then you're just not 100% present, when you're serving others.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. At the beginning, when this started clicking and working, I was like, this is great. I felt like I had to make up for lost time, and I worked. And I think there was a period where I worked 6 months without a week off. And that was not the best. And so I've been very purposeful to plan out my calendar. And, I always take, the week of Christmas off, and I take, certain weeks off. But I've also tried to spread it out, so that my ideal plan is to not go longer than 8 weeks at the most without a break.
That's a good plan.
Yeah.
That's usually a question, like when I'm doing consultation for clinicians wanting to build a private practice, they'll throw it in there. Like, look, I don't want to work every day.
Right.
Like, I want vacation time. I want family time. And I find that to be such a beautiful question, because it connects to, of course, you need that. You having that is going to make you, so much better and so much more present whenever you're serving others. Earlier, you mentioned, and I think it's a mistake that sometimes we make when we're going into private practice. You went into psychology today, and I did the same thing. And you're like, yes, I can do this. Check, check, check.
Yeah.
And then your personal statement is like, who do you serve? All.
Yeah.
Just bring it.
I'm kind, compassionate. I'll walk this path with you. I'll support you. Like, you could have cut and pasted. They all sound the same.
Yeah.
And I didn't really appreciate that. I worked so hard to make it sound, like you said, nice.
Yeah.
And then someone in my personal life needed a referral about something very, very specific. It was about someone needed a referral based on someone specializing in phobia. So I was like, okay, I can help you, no problem. And I went to Psychology Day. I checked off anxiety and I started reading, and they all sounded the same. And then it hit me, being on the other side of like, how am I supposed to pick someone? And then woven in there, every now and then I would see someone like, I help families with teens, or I help couples who fight all the time, or, and those were sticking out. And I thought, I got to rewrite my stuff, because I am not everything to everybody. And when I was checking those off, honestly, it was, what can I do? Not necessarily what do I want to do.
Great. Yeah. I love that. It's scary, when you're in private practice, whether you're new or a veteran, and the numbers aren't there. So we tend to transition to that state of, I'll just check all these boxes to increase the likelihood. But then I think what happens is we don't really hone in into that specialty area and build, a brand. Like, you walk into a store, you see Nike, and then you know all about that brand.
Yeah.
And there's individuals, I think, in every community where someone's like, oh, you need anxiety? Here's Bob.
Right.
Oh, you need a family counselor? Here's Sally.
Yeah.
And you did that, but it was scary to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And then, 6, 7, 8 months in, I remember being like, oh, everyone said to niche down. And still I really, resisted. On the one hand, like, my reality was I was only reaching out to immigration attorneys. The referrals are a little different in this line of work, in that it took some of the pressure off, and that I don't have to reach out to clients. So once I was able to sort of secure referral sources from attorney relationships, then I didn't have to worry about it. They would consistently send me clients. But even though I had that, and even though this is the only work I was doing, excuse me, I resisted unchecking those boxes. And then, I don't even know how the algorithm works, but my profile would cycle up to the top, and I would start getting calls, and I would tell people, I can't see you.
Yeah.
And then I thought, that's not being sincere, and I'm wasting somebody's time. And so why do I have all these things checked off when I'm not doing this? And that's not really what I want. And so it was finally that, realizing that people were still calling me because they were seeing these things on my profile that was no longer an accurate description of the work I was doing. And so I went ahead and changed that. And I thought, that's it. I'll never hear the phone ring again. And then, of course not. And like I said, it's interesting for me because my referrals come directly from the attorneys, give my number to the clients. But yet I still get a lot of notifications that clients have been to the Psychology Today profile page.
Yeah.
Because anytime you Google a therapist, such is the power of the directory, that their name comes up. And so they were spending time reading that profile. And so I thought, well, let me make it very clear that this is what I specialize in. And it's not one of, 20 things that I do.
I like that. I hope clinicians are listening, because there is that level of, I'm supposed to feel nervous about this. I'm supposed to feel a little bit on edge to check just 5 boxes versus 50. Yeah. As far as marketing, I think marketing is something that a lot of clinicians in private practice want a very dissertation-like conversation about.
Right.
And I know that you primarily focus on marketing to attorneys. Mm-hmm. Tell me, as far as, how do you build that relationship? What do you say? What do you not say? How do you showcase yourself? How do you get them, whether it's an attorney or if someone out there needs a pediatrician, whatever the referral person is, how do you build that relationship?
Well, I think you already said the key part, relationship, right? It's not to approach it from that point of view, and to realize that, especially when they're going to be a long-term referral source, you need to have a relationship with this person. Yeah. And so I always I initially approached it from a point of service.
Yes.
How can I help you? How can I become part of your team and help your clients achieve this goal? So what I did initially was I wrote letters, emails. Some I sent out by, old-fashioned snail mail, but mostly emails to attorneys in my area. And I talked about me and what I could do to help them and their clients. And I didn't talk too much about me and my education, because no one, they're not therapists. They don't. Yeah. If I said I'm specialized in EMDR, they don't know what that means. They don't care. But they did care when I said, I have ample parking and weekend hours, right? They're like, oh, that's something my clients need, or I speak Spanish, or I have flexible payment plans, or whatever it was. And so I sort of highlighted those things. And then, throughout, I've maintained those relationships. And I think that this is something that we have an unfair advantage as therapists. We know how to do this. We do this well. And so it's sort of, talking to them, even if I'm calling about a case every now and then, I still hear that, I don't know, someone is out on maternity leave, or they're expecting a baby, or, there's an attorney I work with who's really into fitness and runs marathons. So I always ask, they're training for and that kind of thing. And, I know a little bit about their life, and that's how I build the relationship. And then it does come in handy when you are sort of quote unquote marketing to them, because, if you have someone who, like the attorney who runs marathons and CrossFit and all that, they don't want like a big tray of donuts. Like that's not what they, maybe that's what they secretly want, but like, no, I mean, like they want the organic fruit basket or, something like that. And so it has to fit. And knowing that means about them and you care about them as a person. And times where I've just tried to be of service to them, knowing that it had no benefit to me. I think most recently with, everybody sort of being on lockdown and offices being closed and a lot of attorneys switching to virtual offices, they were really struggling about, office morale and how do I keep my staff engaged. And we were just talking about it, and I gave some ideas out with no intention of like, oh, I'm doing a marketing thing, like we were just talking. And again, I think that they saw that, my experience and my clinical experience is of benefit to them in many areas. And so again, constantly building up that relationship.
I like that you said all of that. Yeah. and the end part, consistently building it. It's almost like if you want, a healthy body, consistently going to the gym and going beyond, right? Beyond, hey, send the client over, or I can provide a good service, to getting to know them as a human being. I find that part's kind of skipped over. There's a lot of focus on the initial part, write this email or, letter, snail mail it. And then once they send you one, do a good job with the one, and then you're golden. Stay golden, boy. But there is a lot of work, that should take place. And I find that, the strategy you're discussing, it relates on all levels, whether it's an attorney or a pediatrician, someone at church, finding someone that you can connect with. What happens, it's a tough question maybe, what happens when you, Cecilia, see somebody you want to reach out to, and then you reach out, but it doesn't go well the first time, doesn't go as you plan?
I think the more you do this, your confidence grows, and you know that you are not the right person for everybody, and not every attorney is the right match for you. There was a group that I worked hard to reach out to. I sent out the email, and then I came by and I dropped stuff off, and nothing, crickets, right? And then like randomly, months later, someone reached out, and I was so, this was, quote unquote, a big name. And we did not work well together, and it did not work well. It worked fine at the beginning, but when I sent the report to be edited, I am always open to anything that would affect the client legally, but they were asking me to write different things clinically, asking me to change the grammar, to use different adjectives. And it almost took me longer to edit it than it took me to write it. And I thought, this is not how I work well.
Yeah.
And it was really hard to let go of that, to have worked so hard, but then to realize I had to think about, how did I feel during this process, and can I tolerate this over and over and over again? And just realizing that it's so hard to give that up, right? Because you think, oh, this is such an opportunity. But it's okay. Like there were many other attorneys. I think we all think, oh, I have to get as many as possible. And what I always tell people, I haven't run my numbers recently, but the last time I did, if I added up all the attorneys I've worked with over the last 4 or 5 years, it's probably about, I don't know, close to 45, maybe 50. And I have a pretty broad area. I'm in Washington, D.C., but attorneys as far up as Baltimore and as far down as Richmond. And that sounds like a huge number, right? But 80% of my referrals come from 4 attorneys.
Yeah.
So it's more quality than quantity for sure. And, I mean, I have attorneys that have sent me 1 case, or have sent me 1 case per year, but that's not and that's not to say that I don't thank them and try to build a relationship with them. But, the ongoing relationship is with the ones that refer me most cases. Then you don't have to have a ton of referral sources. You just have to have a few really good ones.
Yeah. So having a few good referrals, taking care of all your referrals,
Mm-hmm.
and then finding ways to showcase yourself.
Yeah.
I forget who I spoke with, but I mentioned my older brother. His name is Alessio, and he's an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always found it fascinating that, if someone wants a piece of his art, he
Mm-hmm.
could, do a sculpture, he
Mm-hmm.
could draw or paint something, but, they see it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and when I first started private practice, I found a difficulty with sharing,
Yeah.
how I can support, how I can guide and walk with people in life. Because, the average Joe doesn't,
Mm-hmm.
at the Harris Teeter line say, listen, my relationship is struggling right now, but I'm glad that I worked with Bob down the street.
Right, right. And we can't, unlike, a satisfied customer that we cut their hair, we can't
Mm-hmm.
say like, oh, I'm so glad you're happy with your haircut. Could you leave me a good review?
Yes.
We
Yeah.
can't solicit that either. And so it is really tough for us.
What have you found to push against that needle, that, nudge yourself in the right direction in this space? Because it is more difficult, as you mentioned.
In terms of showcasing myself or reaching
Correct.
out to, yeah, I think I'm not, on the one hand, it is sort of I don't want to say a handicap for it. It makes it more difficult for therapists, right? Because
Yeah.
we can't sort of, like you said, like an artist showcase our work.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it suits my personality beautifully because I would hate to have, I have to go out there and showcase. Um, it's not for me. I think there's a lot you can do by, you are your brand as a therapist. So when you do go out and meet the attorneys, if you show that sincerity and caring with them, they know that you're going to treat their clients the same way. So that's one good thing.
Yeah.
Honestly, most of it has been just letting my work stand for itself. Obviously, I'm still going to be a kind, compassionate, polite clinician,
Yeah.
but I want them to just judge me by my work more than anything. And that is something kind of a little unique because there is an actual piece of work completed at the end in terms of a report. But the same way that, a saved marriage, that was what I would showcase if I was a couples therapist. So I prefer to sort of let my work speak for itself.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Listening in, I'm like taking notes internally, because the showcasing part is that you're building consistent relationship with your referrals. And if your referrals are like, I trust her work, then they're
Mm-hmm.
going to share that with other people. And then if you're serving clients and they trust your work, then they're going to do the same thing. And maybe, earlier in the conversation when we talked about getting us to college today and checking off every box that you do everything, it makes it more difficult to then showcase your brand because it's
Right.
spread out everywhere. But if you take that risk, on top of that mountain, you jump off and you get into that water, then you're going to be able to pick one or two things, 5 at most, really hone in on them.
Right. I think where it really clicked for me that I have a relationship and people trust me as a clinician is, it happened once and then it happened a couple more times and I was like, oh, that wasn't just a fluke, is when attorneys or other people that I work with professionally, other professionals, reached out to me for their personal needs. Like,
Yeah.
I'm having trouble in my marriage, or I'm having trouble with this. Do you know first they would say, can you be my therapist a couple of times? But oftentimes they would just say, I'm having trouble. Can you help me find a therapist for this? And to trust me on such a personal, intimate
Mm-hmm.
level, that's when it really clicked for me that
Yeah.
they trust me. They trust me personally. They trust me with their clients, and they even trust me with their own personal needs and that showing that vulnerability of when they have an issue that they need help with.
I love that. I mean, it's a well-deserved moment. I'm happy that you were able to, you're able to get that. And hopefully, listening in, it motivates others to, want to create something like that around their life and the work that they do.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure having you on here.
Thank you.
I've learned so much. I'll tell you that. If others want to connect with you, if they want to reach out and see what you're doing or how you can help them, what's the best way to reach you?
So the website for the course is immigrationevaluationinstitute.com. personally, on Instagram and on Facebook, I just go by my name, Cecilia, which is Cecilia .Racine, Racine. And I think the biggest community I have is on the Facebook group, which is for immigration evaluation therapists. That's what the group is called. I've been really mindful to just keep it for therapists. And I want it to be a place where we can, discuss what's working, what's not, our challenges, our frustrations. So that's another good place where we can connect.
Yeah, perfect. And I'll make sure to have all that in the show notes. So you guys listening in can, just click the button and go right straight to her courses or to the Facebook group or see what awesome pictures she's posting on Instagram.
Sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you for being here, sharing space with me. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you so much. Take care.